You see, Ethan, not everybody wants to turn back the clock. What? What, Evelyn? I'm just trying to show him. Not everybody wants to go back to how things were. So he's a stupid bitch. She doesn't understand that I don't want to go back to how things were before my father found y'all. Not everybody wants to turn back the clock.
Lucas Baker is arguably the most deranged and unhinged member of the Baker family that Ethan Winters will encounter during the events of the game Resident Evil 7 BioHazard. A gifted inventor with a sadistic side, Lucas enjoys creating disturbing games for his victims to play. Anything from the standard blackjack, played with life and death stakes, to a Saw-like torture puzzle designed to be unbeatable by its participants. Lucas takes particular enjoyment in these games and, unlike his parents, prefers to be involved from afar, watching his victims as a scientist may watch a rat in a maze.
Ethan, that is not what I put those things there for.
The story of Lucas Baker as we know it begins with his childhood in Dulvey, Louisiana. Growing up, Lucas was something of a prodigy, winning award after award for competitions revolving around his incredible talent for inventing. The trophies of these accomplishments filling his room with memories and his parents with pride. Yet, despite his talents, something was clearly wrong with Lucas's mind. An issue that was so noticeable to Jack and Marguerite that they took him to a local hospital to have tests run to see what could be done. However, not much seemed to have come of these visits, and instead of the checkups helping the young inventor, they instead earned him ridicule from his fellow classmates in the schoolyard. One child in particular, named Oliver, would tease Lucas relentlessly, calling him a crazy head, a name which made Lucas furious and would make Oliver his first target. Lucas told his school bully that he was having a birthday party, and that Oliver should come over and enjoy the festivities. Upon his arrival, however, Lucas had a very different plan in mind. Using a remote-controlled closing mechanism, he trapped Oliver in the attic of his room, remorseless even as his fellow classmate cried out to him in hunger and thirst, even as his constant cries drifted into light knocking on the ceiling, even as the smell of his decomposing corpse filled the air of Lucas's room. Lucas only worrying that his younger sister Zoe might find a way into the attic, caring nothing for the boy that he'd let suffer mere feet from where he lay every night. Oliver was never found, Lucas getting away with the cruel torture, but the circumstances surrounding his disappearance likely contributed to rumors about the young Baker boy, people around the community referring to him as a bad seed. His antisocial attitude of constantly ignoring everyone in favor of his phone, along with his snide remarks, doing little to aid his cause.
So, Hillbilly Joe and his family go missing.
Not hillbillies, the Bakers. Jack and Marguerite Baker. And they were quiet, not backward. A lot of bad rumors about their son, Lucas. Bad seed, apparently.
Over the course of the next few years, Lucas continued tinkering with his inventions, seemingly using mannequins as stand-ins for his wicked games. He would have conflicts with the rest of his family, and even though it angered him, not much ever came of it. His infatuation with puzzles and traps regulated to a morbid yet seemingly benign fascination. That is, until 2014. When a massive hurricane would strike the surrounding communities of Dulvey and turn the world that the Baker family had come to know upside down. While investigating damages to their property from the storm, Lucas stumbled upon a massive ship that had washed up in a bayou near their home. Amazed, he reported this finding back to his father, who promised to look into it the following day, and when he did, he found 2 survivors amid the wreckage. a woman named Mia Winters, and a little girl named Evelyn. Bringing these survivors back to the family home, Lucas thought little of it, only really taking offense when his parents suggested that the child stay in his old room. However, shortly after Jack had brought the little girl back to the house, strange things began to happen. Lucas, who'd remained in the dining room, was knocked unconscious, the table having been flipped over, presumably by Evelyn. Jack and Marguerite were lost to the child's influence almost immediately, and after failing to capture Zoe, they turned their attention to Lucas. Jack dragging him into his old room, kicking and screaming to meet his new little sister. Lucas was infected by Evelyn just like his mother and father, and like his parents, he became a slave to Evelyn's will, following her commands as she attempted to create the family that she'd always wanted. However, not long after he'd been infected, he was contacted by an organization calling themselves the Connections, the organization that had created this bioweapon that had turned his world inside out. The Connections offered Lucas a deal. Work with them in cataloging what it was that Evelyn was doing in the Baker home, and in return, they would remove her influence from his mind. Lucas agreed to the bargain, and in secret began working with the Connections behind Evelyn's back, Evelyn being none the wiser over her lack of sway with the young man. Other Connections researchers were also brought in, basing themselves in the old abandoned salt mine near the Baker estate, with Lucas working closely with them in their research into what the E-Series bioweapon would do in the wild. Over the course of the next few years, Lucas lived a very busy and complicated life in the swamplands of Dulvey, staying close enough to Evelyn and his family so as not to arouse suspicion, while at the same time reporting to the Connections about his findings. He also found time to finally let free his other passion of creating life-threatening puzzles. And with Evelyn's request to expand the family, he finally had the subjects with which to see these deadly games and puzzles put into action.
So you two are gonna play a little game. And whoever wins gets to walk on out of here alive. So pay attention, because it's life or death.
Lucas and his family would abduct well over 20 people during Evelyn's reign, and for his role in giving this data to the Connections, the criminal organization would make him head researcher of the salt mines laboratory, a role which didn't sit well with the other researchers on location. These researchers began prying into Lucas's private files when he wasn't around, and Lucas wasn't very happy about it. He threw the researchers into a room with several molded, killing them as they begged for their lives, Lucas having to fight back a fit of laughter as he reported it as an unfortunate accident to the Connections. Figuring that his time with the organization might be coming to a close, Lucas attempted to line up a new buyer for his data on Evelyn. However, as he was in the middle of negotiating deals, a new issue arose at the Baker family home. Ethan Winters, Mia's estranged husband, had come looking for his wife, and was stirring up quite a few problems for the Bakers as they attempted to force him into the role of father that Evelyn had picked out for him. Lucas attempted to play along with Evelyn's demands, capturing both Mia and his sister Zoe, who'd been helping Ethan work his way through the house, in order to entice Ethan to come to the family's barn, which he'd turned into a death trap. Ethan, of course, took the bait, following right into Lucas's house of horrors. However, things didn't go like Lucas had hoped. Ethan survived his puzzles, clearing the ones that he could and cheating the ones that Lucas had rigged. Lucas growing ever angrier at his persistence. And as Ethan got closer and closer to the young mastermind, Lucas fled into the salt mines, preparing to finalize his deal with this new buyer and leave his family's home for good.
Well now, Ethan.
The fuck do you want?
You? Dead? Guess that's not in the cards. Not yet.
Lucky me. Look, unless you have any more surprises up your sleeve, I suggest you...
Now that would be telling, Ethan. And I don't do spoilers.
As Lucas escaped the collapse of Evelyn's new family, he attempted to accelerate his timeline to cut ties with the connections and sell his e-data to a new third party. Unfortunately for him, however, a new threat had entered the picture. Blue Umbrella, an organization dedicated to cleaning up illegal bioweapons activity, had made their way to the swamps of Dulvey, finding out about the Connection's operations there and attempting to capture Lucas to get more data on the black market organization's activities. Lucas managed to capture 3 operatives working for Umbrella, using them as bait to capture and kill the real threat to his escape, Chris Redfield. Redfield had been called in as a specialist to help with Umbrella's investigations, and Lucas knew that he was someone to be feared. Playing dead near one of the captured soldiers, Lucas managed to get an explosive around Chris's wrist, warning Chris against following him deeper into the mines. But, of course, Chris didn't listen. And as he watched Lucas kill the 3 hostages, he became ever more determined to catch up with this madman. Following Lucas deep into the mines, Chris found the facility that the Connection's researchers had been using to study Evelyn and her molded, as well as Lucas's plan to sell the e-data to a third party and cut ties with the Connections. Chris eventually managing to catch up with this deranged young man, shooting him in the head and triggering a mutation. Lucas Baker is the only member of the Baker family who was never really a victim. He enjoyed what Evelyn made his family. Not only did it give him power beyond his wildest dreams, but it also let him express himself like he'd never thought possible. Lucas reveled in the killing and torture of those that the family captured, loved playing games with the Forsaken souls unlucky enough to find their way to his little slice of the Louisiana swamps. And as the mold that he so valued transformed him into a creature of nightmares, remorse for his sins that he'd committed on others was probably the last thing on his mind.
Game over.